Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 19th, 2023, and today we are going to be taking a look at new polls from the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. New polls that show a decrease in Trump's support across the nation amongst the Republican Party, bringing him to an average of 44.3% over Ron DeSantis in the second place spot with a 14-point lead. Now, Donald Trump being in the lead is not exactly the worst position that he could be in looking at our 2024 race. The interesting thing, though, is that Donald Trump's lead has been effectively cut in half over the past half year. Meaning that 6 months ago, Donald Trump's lead was hovering around 30 to 40 points, and in low cases, 20 to 30 points. But now, it seems as if the peak for him is a 23-point advantage from Harvard-Harris, when the rest of them show an average hovering around Trump plus 14 points. Now, Donald Trump is a major name. We know this. We've seen him as the president of the United States. There's no secret that Donald Trump comes into this with 100% name recognition and a mandate from the last election. But the problem lies that every single one of these other candidates that has yet to indicate that they are intending to run is still getting a significant chunk of the vote away from President Donald Trump, and most notably from Governor Ron DeSantis, who has not even indicated that he's running in 2024, is hovering around 31%. Now, with Donald Trump's nomination in 2016 and 2020, those elections were, though 2016 was contested, still pretty good for the president. I think that looking back on those elections, he didn't struggle as much as he should have. And I think he will struggle a lot more to win in 2024 than he did even in 2016. And we'll get more into that over the next couple of minutes. But with Donald Trump's announcement back in November, Donald Trump deciding to announce that bid so early on following what was viewed largely as a poor election showing for the Republicans in 2022, it didn't really do that much. You see, we heard a lot about him from even people like me and other journalists and mainstream media outlets that were covering the 2024 race immediately when Donald Trump declared his intent to run for president of the United States yet again in 2024. But that announcement came after a midterm election where everyone was analyzing what went wrong, not so much about what went right, because not much did go right for the GOP, and a lot of people came to the conclusion that it is the fault of President Trump, which is the same reason why now he has less of a lead even after announcing than he did before he announced the race. It just so happened that that midterm election with a poor showing for the GOP has turned off many voters away from voting for him. And looking at our preliminary data in the 2024 race, we can see here that in almost every single one of these polls that we've seen from Politico Morning Consult, from Harvard-Harris, the lead used to be more significant. A perfect example can be in the first iteration of many of these polls. The first ever one was immediately following the 2020 election. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's because Donald Trump was building up this narrative that the election was stolen, and yes, that is correct. And it's the same reason why he holds on to a significant chunk of the base now, even if he isn't necessarily the most quote-unquote unelectable, because in their eyes, the election was stolen from him. But looking at the 2020 election, I point that one out in specific because it shows just how poor the strength was for Donald Trump, how lackluster he was as a top ticket candidate. Because Republicans lost control of the Senate, Democrats maintained control of the House, and they won the presidency. They defeated Donald Trump himself, and just a week later, the voters are turning around on the Republican side saying we want to renominate him. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Donald Trump claims the election was stolen, because if it was stolen, that means that he did not fairly lose, which means these Republicans are saying that, okay, if he didn't fairly lose, he's the rightful winner, therefore we should offer him a second term. We should give him the opportunity to have a second term. And it also shifts away all blame of losses in Georgia's runoff election, of losses in Arizona's Senate election, in numerous House races on the presidential level, away from him and onto the Democrats. Donald Trump blames his loss on the Democrats, and Republican voters liked that. And for a while, they were into it. For a long period of time, his leads had been very, very large. He started off with a 42-point lead, and over time, that lead did at certain points start to dissipate, but generally speaking, were maintained at a pretty high level. Then came the 2022 midterms, and you can see the huge shift in terms of Trump's support. In August of 2022, Trump led by 38 points, 39 points, 42 points, 39 points, 33 points. Going into October, 23, 38, 25. Then after the midterm elections, We dropped not from the 30s, not from the 20s, but down to the 10s. Trump plus 14, Trump plus 18. Emerson came out, Trump plus 30. That's a good result, but it isn't the average. Trump plus 15, Trump plus 23, Trump plus 5 recently, a 5-point lead, and then Trump plus 12, bringing us to an average of what was an average of Trump plus 35 down to Trump plus 13.8. You can see this also more illustrated when it comes down to the polling between DeSantis and Trump. In polls that include President Donald Trump, you can see the average here is that Donald Trump maintained a lead for a very long period of time. And then all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, DeSantis jumps up and Donald Trump goes down to now where the average is a narrow lead for Donald Trump relative to what it was previously. This fall in support has everything to do with, again, the lackluster election results, Democrats even expanding control of the Senate when it came down to 2022. 51-49 is a number that Republicans will remember over the next 2 years because it was a number that they were supposed to have. It was the majority that Republicans were supposed to have at the bare minimum. Well, not only did Democrats hold on to all of their Senate seats, but they won one from the Republicans, and that was Senator Pat Toomey, a Republican seat from Pennsylvania that now is held by Senator John Fetterman. I don't think Republicans ever expected to hear the words Senator John Fetterman all in one sentence following each other, but that's exactly what happened in this election. And the one person who is the common denominator, the one person to blame, is Donald Trump. Who got Dr. Oz to be the GOP nominee? Donald Trump. Who got Blake Masters to be the nominee in Arizona? Trump, right? Who got all these people? Herschel Walker in Georgia? Trump. Who got all of these people to be proposed up to be the Republican nominee? Who elevated their platform? President Donald Trump. And when you see who lost the competitive House races, it's the same exact deal. So all around, the Democrats and Republicans are looking back, doing an autopsy on the last election. And there is one person that Democrats can thank for their victories the same way they can thank him in 2018, 2020, and now 2022. And it's the frontrunner for the GOP nomination, but not exactly a huge frontrunner. I think the problem also lies in the fact that none of these other candidates have announced their bids, meaning none of them are actively seeking out this electorate. None of them are sending out ads. None of them are sending out emails. None of them are on the national television stage trying to win over voters. Donald Trump is trying to do everything he can through Truth Social, through ads, through rallies, etc., etc., etc. Donald Trump is playing this game hard. The rest of these people aren't even in the race yet. And yet somehow the majority of the party is with another candidate. Already, in the past 4 polls, Donald Trump has failed to capture a majority and now has fallen from the graces of what was an overarching and overwhelming support that used to be there for Donald Trump and is no longer there. But don't get me wrong, Donald Trump can still win the 2024 Republican presidential nomination as he did in 2016. He may have won the general election, but his primary performance was one that I think maybe might surprise a few people. Because despite Donald Trump being the 2016 Republican presidential nominee, he did not receive the majority of votes in the 2016 primary. In fact, he received just 44.9% of the vote. It's very similar to the numbers that we see right now. The second place candidate, Ted Cruz, received 25%. Marco Rubio received 11%. John Kasich received 14%. When you put these numbers together, you start to see how they tie in together. You start to see where that support went away from Donald Trump, right? You add in Ted Cruz and John Kasich together alone, it's 45-39. You add in Marco Rubio, then you're bumping up to 50-45, with the opposition candidate in the lead. The problem was that there were so many candidates on the ballot that Republicans were unable to come to a consensus as to which candidate was the most anti-Trump. Which candidate was going to be the mainstream one to push back against this one plurality-driven candidate, President Donald Trump at the time, just Donald Trump. He was the one that Republicans were afraid of becoming the nominee, and then when he won, their attitudes changed. They allowed him to lead the party in 2018, as expected. As the incumbent, they lost. 2020, they said, okay, you have a good chance, as you did in 2016, he lost. Then came 2022, he lost. And then in 2024, they're trying to put him back up to be the Republican nominee again. But I think Republican primary voters are starting to catch on that this is the one common denominator over the past 3 election cycles that has resulted in losses. And now it's time for somebody new. But if the voters maintain the way they are right now, and every single primary election is held out, Donald Trump wins. Some states where there's a winner-take-all system, some states where there's a winner-take-most system, where it isn't proportional, Donald Trump really takes it away. And we could see this happen very early on in the South Carolina Republican presidential primary, because in this election, because there was no clear consensus against Trump, he did not even get more than a third of the vote, yet got 100% of the delegates because the Republican primary system is in fact broken, number one. But number two, because of the way this is set up, despite the combined vote share of candidates, many of which were reluctant to support Trump in the primary after dropping out, and then reluctant to do so in the general election, the combined vote share against Donald Trump was 67.5%. 67.5% of Republican primary voters said, I don't want Trump, and yet 100% of their representation went to him. Why? Because of these plurality victories. Look at Florida, too, a huge state, right, where Donald Trump got a winner-take-all primary. 99 delegates from the nation's third most populous state. Donald Trump received 99 delegates with 45% of the vote. Marco Rubio, the senator from this state, received 27% of the vote, but you know what happened? He got 0 delegates. It is these primaries that are going to be the reason why Donald Trump can still win. If Republicans truly want to prevent him from winning the nomination, which it looks like the combined tally against Donald Trump is there, the combined vote share of all of these remaining candidates is slightly higher than the amount of the vote share that Donald Trump has right now. That alone tells us that there is a concerted effort to choose somebody else besides Trump. But the question is who? And it looks like a lot of that can be seen as Ron DeSantis. The problem is, many of these other Republicans have been seeing the presidency as something within reach for decades. This is the end goal of almost every single prominent politician on both sides of the aisle. They want to be president of the United States. That can be seen in 2016 with over 15 candidates. That can be seen in 2020 with over 20 Democrats running for president. And in 2024, we should expect it to be no different. Because people see Joe Biden as a vulnerable candidate, a Democrat who is unpopular nationwide, many Republicans are going to consider running. Those who have publicly expressed interest, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Larry Hogan, Kristi Noem, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, these are prominent names. You go down to the list of potential candidates, those who have refused to decline intent, which means they are very much considering it. Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, Ron DeSantis, Doug Ducey, John Kasich, Brian Kemp, Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, Glenn Youngkin, people who have announced bids before, who have ran for president before, or who have entertained it very heavily before. These are people that if they all enter the race, along with, Ron DeSantis, I can guarantee you now that Donald Trump will very much have a good chance at winning the nomination because the vote will be split. However, if because this lead has now narrowed down to a point where because it has drastically fallen off from that 30 point lead, he is within striking distance. Candidates here are within striking distance of taking down Donald Trump, most notably Ron DeSantis. If DeSantis doesn't run, I don't know who will be the next pick. I don't know who will be elevated to that position of prominence. But what I will say is that there is a very good chance that where we are right now, where Donald Trump is right now, if Republicans pounce on him, they can take him down. However, too, there is this idea that the DeSantis bump is starting to dissipate, that his prominence and his climb and support is starting to level out at about a third of the Republican primary vote, and that Donald Trump is going to maintain a lead into the primary season, and it's going to dissuade Ron DeSantis from running. DeSantis is at a pivotal point right now. He needs to make a decision as to whether or not he's going to run because, quite frankly, if he decides against it, Donald Trump wins the nomination. If he doesn't go for it now, Donald Trump wins the nomination. There are difficult things that really put these politicians in positions of immediate focus where they need to make an immediate decision. And a lot of it has to do with where the polls lie. Because Donald Trump's lead is no longer as prominent, because it is no longer as significant, Republicans have a chance at stopping him. But if they don't act now, the chances are they will not be able to stop him, and 2024 will be a repeat of 2020 in both the primary and the general election result, with Joe Biden likely winning that rematch against the former president. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022-24 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.